Hello, now I'm going to illustrate the implementation uh, of the data access layer, the service layer, and the data transfer objects using the dashboard as an example, okay, in JPA. Okay, so let's start, as we have seen, let's start with dashboard service, which is the class that actually represents the service layer. And the first thing we'll see here is that you have an annotation saying that is a service. So it's necessary that you say it is a service. And then you have these auto-wired, and these basically are references to the data access layer. Here you have references to the data access layer of the course execution, of the student, and the dashboard. So which means that while programming in this layer, you can access the data access layer, okay? Basically to read and write objects to and from the database. Read from and to the database, okay? Another thing is that the reason it is auto-wired is that you don't need to create an instance, okay? GPA will just, actually it's Spring, but it will, as soon as it discovers this service, will provide the correct repositories to access the data. Then I will show you what is the API you can invoke on these repositories, okay? And to do that, let's look at the first service I want you to look at, which is create dashboard, okay? The other annotation you have here is that it is transactional. As I told you, actually, this is the transactional, which means that all the reads and writes that are going to occur in the context of these invocations will be atomic and consistent. Okay, it provides acid properties and isolation. Okay. So what is the first thing you do? Look, when you create a dashboard, you receive IDs of course execution and student ID. As I told you, every entity in the domain layer need to have a unique identifier. I told you that all the classes should have an ID, okay? So why is the goal of this ID? Is because now it's very easy to get the information for the database. How? You can use the course execution repository, and by default there's a method which is find by ID that provides you a course execution object when you invoke it. And the same for the student. If it does not find any, then basically throws exceptions, okay? Are exceptions that are thrown. So what do you have here? What you have here is the service layer is accessing the data access layer, not the dashboard repository, but the course execution repository and the student repository to get the objects from the database into the domain layer, okay? So in this point, we already have two objects, a course execution object and a student object, if everything is okay. Then you do some verifications, so you can navigate. Look, I have student get dashboards, and this basically is what we have described here, that the student has a set of dashboards. So you can now do pure object-oriented programming, okay? And you do get dashboard, and you do here a verification if the dashboard, the student already has a dashboard for that course execution, because there's a restriction you want to verify. There's a single one, okay? And after these verifications, I have this auxiliary method there because it's used in two places. What do? You basically do a normal object-oriented operation. You create an object, and then you access your repository. So you access the data access layer and say store it. Okay, and you store it. And finally, since this returns a dashboard DTO, which is the result, so you create the object and you return. So it's what we described here as the data transfer object. Okay, as I told you, it exists to encapsulate the domain model. So this is a facade, as we learned in object-oriented programming, and it returns a data transfer object, and we can look at this data transfer object and see what does it have. And it's pretty simple. Data transfer object is basically a set of attributes. Okay, it has the accessors, the getters and setters for these attributes, and the constructor receives a domain object and generates the data. So it's just information about the object. Okay, good. So let's see another similar one, that is the remove dashboard. In this case, you receive a dashboard ID. So in this case, you verify if it is not null, but then you again access the dashboard repository. So you access this layer to find it. And once you have it, you just remove it, and then again you invoke a repository to say delete this object, and the object is deleted from the database. What you do in the remove, just out of curiosity, well, in the remove, look, you have seen that, you have seen that this dashboard is connected with the student. Okay, and so what does it do? Basically, is just write it, put it like null, and say to the student, remove me from the list, which is what is being said here. Okay, good. And another thing, you go to the dashboard and you just delete it. Okay, so the final thing that I wanted to show you is the dashboard repository. Well, it's just this API that implements a set of methods that you basically is an API that is automatically generated, and you can use these methods. In particular, you can do find all. It finds all the instances of this type of domain entity, but you can get the find by ID, find all by ID, find okay okay, get by ID. Okay, you have these methods here. Okay, so that's it. It's pretty simple, and we have seen how these two implementation of these two methods or two services, create dashboard and remove dashboard, are actually implemented through the different layers. Okay, and provide the answers you need. Okay, good. Thank you.